Hello, welcome back to Underrated Movies. I'm your guy, I'm your man, Mr. Alton Henry. Today I will be continuing and concluding the Ash vs. Evil Dead series on its third and final season. It centers around, excuse me, it centers around Ash discovering that he has a daughter that he never knew about, and finding out that there's some people that are again resurrecting evil stupidly, and that's now running amok around the world. And they must, Ash, along with his Pablo and Kelly and his daughter, must stop evil again while also trying to bond with his daughter. Where we bring back the main antagonist. I already forgot her name. Oh, Ruby. While she also tries to come up with her own schemes of taking out Ash and, having evil run amok on around the world all over again. And this one I thought was maybe one of the weaker season, but I thought it was actually still a pretty good, solid series or season to conclude the show. You have Ash yet again still trying to combat about who he is and why he is given this responsibility to basically take down evil. And also having the challenge of trying to be a dad. And you kind of see that he really doesn't fit the job, but he does his best to really comfort his daughter, which I believe her name is Brandy. It's actually funny how they kind of reveal the scenario, how that happens. So it kind of happens sometime around maybe before, like literally maybe before Evil Dead or after. But I think there was a little continuity to that, but they made it just for jokes. So it was actually kind of interesting to kind of see that dynamic. And every time that when evil sets forth, Ash would try to explain certain things about his life to his daughter that she just straight up just is appalled and repulsed by him. That she's like she doesn't want anything to do with him. And Ruby, who disguises herself as a school counselor, tries to turn his daughter against him and try to manipulate him while also trying to use her to basically break down Ash Williams psychologically and trying to set him up by giving birth to a clone of Ash Williams, which they do that again, which they bring back another clone version of Ash Williams, which they pretty much done that in all the seasons. There was one in season 1, they had a clone version somewhat in season 2, and then they do it again here in season 3, which gets a little bit repetitive, but they find creative ways to make it interesting. And I think, didn't they do it sometime in Evil Dead 2? So they have a thing about bringing people back, like basically a clone of themselves, and an evil version and a good version. Like they bring that back constantly. And then they also introduce a new story element of these like cult like people that are huge supporters of Ash Williams and are trying to, I forgot what they're called, they're like Knights of something, where they've come to aid Ash in his quest in stopping evil since the prophecy back in Army of Darkness. And I like that I like the group, but I feel like during the course of the series they don't really do much with these characters. In fact, they actually played them off for gags. there's a moment where one character is introduced and he is pretty much killed off, I think, in the third episode. Little spoiler, but they bring him back a little bit later on in like episode 7 and 8. And then they also bring the group of this Knights of Ash Williams followers. They bring them around, I think, in the 5th episode, and then they do a little bit with them, but they don't do too much to where, I guess if they did, it would have kind of prolonged the series a little bit longer. And I think it might have been, I don't know, maybe in familiar territory, but I feel like they were underused. Yeah, I felt like they were underused. And then they also introduced this little element of Ruby trying to resurrect somebody that she's teaming up with. And there's a moment where that character ends up possessing Kelly's body. Not for a good chunk of it, like for at least a good 3 episodes, you kind of see where that kind of goes. And then you also have, I feel like you have a lot of, I feel like you have a lot of, I'm really liking that the show kind of ties in back to the previous season where they're always referencing something that happened in the previous seasons and in the movies that constantly keeps you really in the loop of what's going on in the story. And it's really interesting when it really gets to some moments actually disgusting as always, but I think the season 2 was a little bit more gruesome than season 3. But they got some crazy moments in here which I won't really spoil out. Like it gets very creative. It gets very innovative and creative towards the end. And let's just say how the show ends. Completely unexpectedly. And it's a moment to where when Ash Williams reflects on himself that he constantly is trying to avoid, I guess, his purpose that he has, that he is the one chosen to fight against evil. So there's a moment where he realizes it and he takes on this big old demon who's going to take over the world. He takes it down. And then you have this jump cut, little of a spoiler, sometime into the future when it's post-apocalyptic. And then, unfortunately, that's kind of where the show ends, and you kind of want to know where they were going to go with that, because it was like this man. It kind of implied that this man is always going to fight evildoers, pretty much for the cycle of his life. But it was an interesting twist that story element gets introduced in the final episode. So I'm kind of wondering where they're going to take with that originally before it was canceled. I have heard that they might they might try to bring it back in a different form as an animation, but it's something to where I feel like it was a nice conclusion to the show. But I feel like with a show like Ash vs. Evil Dead, you kind of wonder how they're going to conclude the series. It's really fascinating. I personally don't know if this season is really the last season. It was actually kind of funny what I've heard when I finally found out what was the reason why it was canceled after 3 seasons. That I guess, and this is coming from Bruce Campbell, and there's a video up somewhere. I might try to link it down below, where I guess that it since it was on Starz, I think Liongate's on Starz or whatever, that I guess nobody really knew about the show. I mean, they had some numbers, but the ratings I think were tipping toeing into the 3rd season, and nobody really knew about the show. So I guess when he asked a few people, like, "Hey, have you seen our show?" I was like, "Oh no, I haven't." But what channel is it on? It's like it's on Starz. Like, what is Starz? Like, you seriously, you don't know what Starz is? No, I don't know what Starz. So I guess that kind of like clicked for him. Like, okay, so we weren't getting enough ratings because nobody knew the program existed, which was interesting. I heard other rumors of why the show was canceled, but I guess that was the legitimate reason that nobody really knew about the show. Currently, it's on Netflix right now. I highly recommend checking it out, especially during this time where now we're jumping into the Halloween season. If you're looking for a good scare, horror comedy, gory, fantastic action, and something pretty fun, I highly recommend checking out Ash vs. Evil Dead. Highly recommend checking it out. And you don't necessarily need to watch um, Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness. I mean, they're nice add-ons, but I feel like the show does enough callbacks to the original that I feel like you're kind of filled in. So I don't. You can watch the original movies, but I feel like you don't need to watch it because I feel like on its own, I feel like you're well informed on its own. Ash vs. Evil Dead, the final season. Have you seen it? Comment below. Let me know what you thought about it. And let me know what is your favorite underrated television show.